and give you some guidance over the next several days, and we'll take whatever questions you have. Before we start, I'd like to introduce a few other friends and people who have been of remarkable good help over the last 48 hours or so. Uh, to my left is Scott Racker, who directs the Robert D. and Billy Ray Center at Drake University. Scott will follow me and will share some information after I'm finished. To his left is Bill Jackson. Bill, since you said it, I'll say it. Bill is the oldest, we think, former Ray staffer. Bill was here for about 10 years, from 1970 to about 1979, and has remained a very close friend and has been integral in all of our work, planning this and certainly the last few days. And to his left is John McCarroll. Many of you know John from his current role with directing communications at Iowa State University. John was the last press secretary for Governor Ray, 1981 and 1982. And we've asked him to be helpful specifically at this location on Thursday afternoon and evening. To his left is Colonel Michael One, who's the public affairs officer for the Iowa National Guard. Mike is a great guy, and writ large, the Iowa National Guard, from Adjutant General Tim Orr on down, have been of great help to us over the last several weeks as we've worked on plans, and certainly the last couple of days. And I might just mention parenthetically that Adjutant General Tim Orr will be cutting short a trip to Washington, D.C. to be back here on Thursday. And on Thursday and on Friday, he will be escorting former First Lady Mrs. Ray. I'd like to also thank the governor's staff. From my conversation with Governor Reynolds on Sunday to conversations with Ryan Koopmans, to Catherine Huggins here, and Brenna Smith. And I would also add the former Chief of Staff, Jake Ketzner, have been very helpful to us recently as these plans have taken shape. So I want to thank you and ask you to pass those thanks, Catherine. We're meeting in what Governor Branstad designated several years ago the Robert D. Ray Conference Room. And you can see the portrait of the governor on that wall. This may be out of the norm, and I hope you take it in the right vein, but I think because of what we're talking about today, I'd like to ask everybody to stand and just have about 5 seconds of silence in memory of Governor Ray. Thank you. We also want to express on behalf of the family their appreciation for the sensitive and respectful manner in which you have covered the news of Governor Ray's passing. It is through your reporting on the governor's life, record, and legacy that some Iowans have learned for the first time all of the things that he did, and other Iowans have been reminded or relearned of his record, which has triggered an outpouring of support and appreciation on social media. And so we all want to thank you for the work that you're doing and will do over the next couple of days. Today, we will color in some of the details for Thursday and Friday. Thursday here at the Capitol, Friday at First Christian, we'll give you some guidance on coverage. We'll talk about how Iowans can express their condolences and offer memorials, and we'll take whatever questions you'd like. I'm going to step through this pretty quickly, and then when we get done with that, we'll take your questions. On Thursday afternoon, roughly 3:45, a short motorcade will leave Dunn's Funeral Home on Grand Avenue. It will be led by the Des Moines Police. They're quite eager to be helpful in honoring his service as mayor of Des Moines post-governorship. The motorcade will pass by Terrace Hill, the former governor's mansion at 2900 Grand, Wesley Acres, where the Rays lived the last 5 years, and then we'll route by Roosevelt High School, where the governor and Mrs. Ray met, both graduated, and then come east on University Avenue and go by Drake University, where they were both students and graduated. The exact route is being prepared by the Des Moines Police, and we'll have that for you probably in 24 hours. Mostly this is to allow the Ray's grandchildren, 8 grandchildren, to see some of the touch points of their lives, where they went to school, go by First Christian Church, where the service will be on Friday. The motorcade will come downtown, pass and stop at City Hall at Robert D. Ray Drive. And at that point, a highway patrol trooper will juxtapose with the local police department. And the state trooper, the troopers guarded and drove Governor Ray, protected him for 14 years. A trooper will escort him back to his final stop at the Capitol. Around 4:30, the motorcade will come up from the southwest corner of the Capitol and stop on the west steps. The governor will be borne by Iowa Air and Army Guard through a cordon of additional Guard officers. Will be borne up the west steps. And in the rotunda, he will be guarded by a cordon of 4 around the bier, 2 Iowa Guard, 1 Air, 1 Army, 1 highway patrolman, and 1 Des Moines policeman. The family will enter the Capitol and will be brought upstairs at 5 o'clock. There will be a brief ceremony. There will be no program and no speakers. And we'll just share with you a little bit about what will happen there. 3 wreaths will be laid by the governor's casket, which will be draped in an American flag. The first wreath is red, and it will be presented by the 4 Ray granddaughters. The second white wreath will be brought forward by 6 representatives of the Asian community. And then the third wreath, red, white, and blue, will be presented by Governor Reynolds on behalf of the people of Iowa. We expect that all of that will conclude by before 5:30. The Asian group will then begin the process of filing in a counterclockwise way around the casket, and that will lead the procession of Iowans who will be here. And that opportunity will exist until 8:30. We encourage Iowans to come to the State House early on Thursday afternoon to pay their respects. There will only be one entrance open. It will be the south entrance. We will ask people to try to arrive as early as 3:30. Security will be in force, so there will be a queue. There will also be touch screens provided by Dunn's Funeral Home, and I should introduce Robin Walter to you. She has been unbelievably good in helping with all of these plans. And we'll have, I think, 5 or 6 stations for people. If they want to leave their name and address, they can do so. Correct? All right. So then people will come in through that south entrance and find their way upstairs via the grand staircase on the east side. There will be standing room for people. In terms of coverage, just so you know what the layout will be, in the southwest corner of the rotunda, first floor, right on the side of this office, will be where the family will sit. Mrs. Ray, 3 daughters, 3 sons-in-law, and grandchildren, and close extended family. Opposite them in the southeast corner near the elevator will be Governor Reynolds, Lieutenant Governor Gregg, and former governors. Spoken with all of the former governors, and they're all making, some know they will be here, some are making extraordinary efforts to be here, and that includes Governor Branstad. If he makes it, he will not be here on Thursday, but hopes to try to be here on Friday for the funeral. We know that some Iowans may want to go upstairs and view the ceremony from the second floor. That will be allowed around the rail upstairs. Let's go to Friday, and then we'll go get close to taking your questions. On Friday, this is much shorter. The service at First Christian Church at 25th and University will be at 1 o'clock. We're actually encouraging Iowans to come here on Thursday, where there's more access, more flexibility, more opportunity to move around, and the only opportunity to pay their individual respects to the governor by filing by his casket. That will be the only opportunity for people to do that. On Friday, the service starts at 1. We would encourage people to try to be in the sanctuary or the balcony by 12:30. The service will be live streamed, and Scott and/or Jake Bernstein from Drake Communications will be able to give you the coordinates for the live streaming. And now I'd like to ask Scott to come up here and share with you a little information about how Iowans can personally express their condolences and offer memorials and be supportive to the Robert Ray and Billy Ray Center. Scott.
Thanks, David. Morning, everybody. First, I was with Mrs. Ray and the family last night, and they asked me, as they knew this was happening today, to first express two things. One, just a very sincere thank you to all of the Iowans, those across the country and in fact the world that have shown such a demonstrable outpouring of love and support for their family at this time, and they're very appreciative of that. Second, and most specific to you and the media, Governor Ray had a fond admiration for openness in government and trying to provide to the media what they wanted. And Mrs. Ray and the family are sincerely appreciative for the significant coverage of the significance of Governor Ray's life and his impact on the lives of others that the media has provided. And I'm just here expressing their appreciation to you and the media for that. As David mentioned, we are encouraging Iowans to come and pay their respects at the Capitol. There's a balance between the public observance of an individual who is legendary in his legacy of impact, and also allowing a family the private time to grieve their husband, father, and grandfather. The family has asked that in lieu of flowers, contributions could be made to the Robert D. and Billy Ray Center at Drake University to further advance the cause of civility through character and ethical leadership that were not only important to Governor Ray as advocacy, but certainly how he and Mrs. Ray have lived and continue, she will, to live her life. The information for that is online and available for individuals at Drake University, the Ray Center. We are also encouraging Iowans to leave their remembrances of Governor Ray at the Ray Center. We are capturing people's memories, thoughts, occurrences with Governor Ray. The Robert D. and Billy Ray archives are housed at Drake University. Not only will the gubernatorial papers that are going over there on loan to be transcribed and digitized, but all of their personal records and papers. So if Iowans want to leave a memory or a reflection of Governor Ray, those will all be captured at the Ray Center, and that's at the Ray Center website for Drake, and we'll have that information if you go online. And as David had mentioned, the funeral service itself will be live streamed. That address is live.drake.edu. Should go up about 12:30, and the entirety of the service will be covered. So those Iowans that are not able to get there, or those Iowans that are aware that there's limited seating in the church, will be able to still see the proceedings of that. We're honored at Drake University, as well as the Ray Center, to continue the commitment that Governor Ray has had and Drake has to transform lives and improve communities. That's what Governor Ray's life was about, and that's what we want to honor and acknowledge through both this private and public time. If we have questions afterwards, I'll be happy to answer those. David?
Thank you, Scott. So just a brief word about coverage back here on Thursday afternoon. We encourage you to be here early as well. You know your way around here, all of you do. As we talked earlier, the Asian group will be in the northeast corner, former governors and governor in the southeast corner, the family in the southwest corner, the northwest corner of the rotunda east of the Secretary of State's office will be where we would ask the press to converge. John will be point there. Michael will be there. We'll give you all the help we can. One suggestion we have for you, we know that many of you will be interested in being outside when the governor's motorcade arrives here. So the area right on the north of the battleship, right out to the north side of the west steps will be available for you to come on the outside and shoot the motorcade coming up the driveway and the governor being brought up the steps by the Iowa Guard. And there'll be about a 20-minute lag time in there for family to then, who will watch that, to then come in here, relax for a few minutes, and then go upstairs. During that time, you can come inside, go to that northwest corner of the rotunda circle and set up. And that's it. If you have any questions, we'll take them and try to give you all the help that you need. Cynthia?
Just to reiterate, for all the 17.
Yes.
Tell us more about
Yes. We can get that information to Reverend Spangler.
Pastor Bill Spangler Dunning will be the officiant at the service. There will be 3 eulogists at the service: David Ullman, Ambassador Ken Quinn, and myself. And our best efforts will be to acknowledge Governor Ray's wishes and have it be an hour or less. And there will be some special music as well.
I think you tell us about the historical precedent of ceremony lying in the state.
Mm-hmm. Joyce, that's a good question. We've had some research done, and what we know, the best we know, is that about 8, maybe nine individuals laid in state in the rotunda. The first was, thank you. The first one was a Civil War brigadier general who had been a legislator, and at the end of his life actually worked as a custodian at the Iowa Capitol. And that was the only individual that we've learned who laid in state in the 19th century. Between the early 1920s and 1954, there was a 30-year period when several noted Iowans lay in state. A couple of former governors, the first Henry Wallace, who was Secretary of Agriculture under President Harding and President Coolidge. And the last individual who laid in state was Governor Beardsley, who tragically died in a car accident as the sitting governor in 1954, and actually laid in state in the formal office upstairs, not out in the rotunda. And to the best of our knowledge, that has not happened since 1954, so that's 64 years. Any other questions?
Will there be cameras allowed in?
Yes.
Where
In the northwest corner, over this direction, on the first floor, outside the Secretary of State's office, will be where John and Michael will marshal everybody. Okay. We have space to have as many cameras as show up.
you mentioned this first get here early. I just want to make sure I understand. So even like 8 a.m. on Thursday, the main entrance, the entrances to the Capitol going to be closed, and just that one entrance point, or that's several hours before anything starts. Is that
Mhm.
going to be accessible to the press to come in?
Is Catherine still in here? Okay. My understanding is that the south entrance, and Cynthia, you just came in this entrance. Those two entrances, yeah, those two entrances generally are open. You know that, and will be open on Thursday. Without the legislature here, it's pretty relaxed place. But because of the motorcade arrival over here at 4:30, that entrance will not be available at 4:30 or before. So if you're here early enough, you can come in that entrance. That will be closed probably about 3:30 or so. And then the only entrance for the public will be at the south entrance. I should also mention those parking lots that will obviously be available, and the east parking lot, the legislative parking lot, will be available. The gate will be open, so people can park there on Thursday. You can, the press can come out. No. We've assumed that, no, it's not an assumption. You will go right back. The door will be open or available, not locked. You can come out, witness it, shoot it, and go, or video it, and then his arrival, and come back inside. Well, Governor Ray's relationship with the Asian community and theirs with him is pretty well known. And some of the most heartfelt, moving, emotional tributes, including what was in the Register this morning, have come from some whose lives were saved, or the children or grandchildren of people whose lives were saved. We assumed that there would be keen interest in their participation in the service, in the laying in state. We were right, and they have responded with appreciation for the opportunity to pay their respects in a special way, including one of the three wreaths and the opportunity to lead the public filing by his casket. Well, that church was very special to the governor's mother, Mildred Ray. And the Rays, as teenagers, went to that church, and as students, they were married there. I assume the children are baptized there. I don't know that. Maybe you do.
One thing to add to this, David, too, is in the book Governor, that was done by John Bowermaster, and actually has quotes from Governor Ray's mother, Mildred Ray. It was actually while they were Roosevelt High School sweethearts, they met at what was then University Christian Church, and at church camp, where one year they were both king and queen at the church camp. And that was where their first connection came. So as David said, it's been a pinnacle of their lives, of their family lives, have been in that church. For a legislative side note for you that want to really dive deep, Governor Ray had a Sunday school classmate. They differed by a few years, but they were connected through church, by the name of John Connors, former Representative John Connors. And if you go back to chapter 20 and the role that those two men played, they had a common bond of having grown up in the same church together while they differed dramatically politically.
They were lifelong friends.
Yep.
Also, just to add that before every inaugural, Bill, you'd remember this, there was always a service the night before the inaugurations at First Christian. Next.
I want to make sure I understand, so I know Thursday, when we're down to just the one entrance, at that point, public's lined up, if we get here, there's no separate immediate entrance, we'd be stuck in that long line.
We could probably move.
Otherwise, so when did you say that other entrance will close for the North?
We believe that this entrance will close by 3:30, no later. You're good. You should be good. If keep your press ID with you, okay? We'll help you out.
Assume there are no copyright issues if publication, website, if a radio station would like to broadcast live on Friday, they would have the right.
Yes. Yes. Cynthia, did you have a question?
Just to tell the public the doors will be
open. Until,
so everyone who's in.
yeah, actually till 8:30, right? And then they will be closed at 8:30. And by 9 o'clock, the rotunda will be closed. David, no questions? Okay.
Stepping back on a personal note, reflect for a Friday.
Not in a moment. Um, Governor Ray was known and beloved by 3 generations of Iowans, his contemporaries, their children, and now a whole new generation that didn't know him as governor. If you voted at age 18 in his final reelection campaign in 1978, you're 58 years old today. So a lot of Iowans never voted for him and didn't know or don't know a whole lot about his service as governor. So that's why I mentioned before, some are learning, some relearning all that he did as a leader, as a political leader, as the head of this branch of government, as the governor for the whole state, and frankly, a courageous moral leader whose reach extended beyond our boundary. So it's quite fitting that he have the honor, which was approved by the governor, to lay in state at the Iowa Capitol. One of his first jobs, as you may know, I'm digressing, was as a reading clerk in the Iowa Senate in the early 50s. So he had a long history with this building, loved this building, obviously loved this office. And it's almost the perfect setting for him to come back here one last time. If there ever was a person right for the job and a job right for the man, I would say it was the governorship and Robert D. Ray.
Bill Jackson is launched here. In addition to your general thoughts, I understand that Governor Ray loved ping pong.
I was not the athlete. My desk was right out here where Margaret Huff now sits. So I was kind of the keeper of the paddles and the ping pong balls. The football we kept back there, and I just kind of supervised the athletic events that went on.
Among all much younger staff.
Yeah,
But he usually won.
absolutely. He was an excellent ping pong player. In fact, if I recall correctly, several of his trips to China, he did play, and I don't know what the score was in China, but we'll assume he put on a good match.
Well, when President Xi's father was here in the early 80s, a ping pong table was brought into this room. It was right here. And I don't know the score for that game either. I don't know if the governor threw that one or probably not. He probably beat him.
Bill, do you have any other thoughts you can share?
Well, well, yes, I have a lot of thoughts, but I won't bore you with a lot of them. But Governor Ray was very receptive to the staff and their families. My kids at that time were, one had just been born, and my son was 1 year old when I started in 1970. And at the time, I was the youngest person on the staff, and out of 5 staff people. And you know what the youngest one gets to do, all the things the older ones don't want to do. And part of my job at the time was to keep his schedule outside appearances. Well, we always had an aide go along with the governor on those appearances. Well, being the youngest one on the staff, I got to go on all those events. And if you can think of a 27-year-old going with the governor and flying to all these places or going by auto to these events, these celebrations, these meetings, just was an outstanding event. And any social event the governor had at Terrace Hill or at the former mansion, your spouse and the kids were always invited. And I can remember a Halloween party at Terrace Hill, and my kids were like this. And so were all the rest of the kids, and we all dressed in costume. And it was an opportunity for the governor to guess who we were in costume. But I always remember he always asked. In fact, he continues to ask. In fact, I was just with Mrs. Ray. What was that? Probably a month ago.
2 weeks.
2 weeks ago, and she said, "Well, tell me what are Jeff and Janet doing?" Which were my kids. So they always remembered them, and of course, their own kids were a little older than mine, but we still talk about them.
About whether there's any sort of parallels to the conversation about refugees decades ago and the national immigration debate. I don't know if there's just anything else to add to that point, simply because I've seen through a lot of social media where people are just saying, imagine that a politician who really believes strongly on this subject and stood by it. And I just don't know if either one of you has anything to elaborate on. I know it is a sensitive subject, but one that is sort of part of Ray's legacy.
Gosh, if you want to take that one, Joe.
I'll let you take that.
Well, let me just say, of course, it's a sensitive subject, but it's also a very important subject. And there may be more contrasts these days than parallels with what's occurring. The era was different back then. Governor Ray had been elected 4 times, and in '78, his 5th time, overwhelmingly. And Iowans got to know that if he said something, it was true. And if he felt strongly about something and asked Iowans to help them, that they would probably give him the benefit of the doubt. And you all know the chronology. I don't need to repeat it. Ambassador Ken Quinn has spoken about this and written about this many, many times, so we don't need to go through all of that today. But I'll say all that. It was not without controversy, for sure. There were many people who just couldn't quite figure out, why would we have to do this? Why should we do this? And what Governor Ray did brilliantly, in my view, was prepare. He knew what he wanted to do and communicated that to the White House, and didn't take a long time to communicate it publicly. But he readily understood that this would take some work. And so he reached out to the denominational leaders in our state. He reached out to the business community. He reached out to local mayors and said, look, we can't do this by ourselves here with our agencies. And also, frankly, he reached out to the press. And he talked to media executives and said, this is going to happen. And if we embark on this, we're going to do it the right way. And this will be good for Iowa. And so many in the media, I would say, offered incredible support. Now, that doesn't mean they abridged their rights to cover the story and the pros and cons and reactions all directions. But it was helpful to us. And this first success in 1975, I believe, conditioned Iowans that we could do this. This small state, 1% of the population of our country in the middle of the heartland, could put our heart in play and do this. We settled 1,500 to 2,000 people, but it worked. And so then when there was another opportunity to do that, and a third opportunity later in the decade to not bring more people in, but to simply send money quickly to help people who were dying, people responded. And in the matter of a handful of weeks, from roughly Thanksgiving to Christmas, this is 78, 79, put the multiple of 2.0 or 3.0 on dollars, $500,000 came in from Iowans for the Iowa Shares program. So Iowans voted with their hearts, their minds, their pocketbooks. Now we look at today. I think the lessons we could look at, or you could write about, are that we are all God's children. These are all, everybody has a right to certain opportunities in life, certainly the opportunity to live, and hopefully to live in freedom. And with the Thai Dam refugees, those were people who had been fighting communists. North Vietnam won the war. They were at great peril. They didn't have anywhere to go. And they wanted to stay together as a small community. And when all the states passed, one state stood up and was led by Barbara Ray. So that maybe rounds out my conversation that it takes moral leadership and it takes courage. And I'm not going to comment on the scene today, but I would just say that maybe lessons that were learned then, hard earned and learned, could be looked at again. And by the way, all the people who came to Iowa, this is important to note, were political refugees, and so they were legal. Okay, so there's no debate or no discussion about that. It was appropriate that occur. It did occur, and now you've got children, maybe now grandchildren of those men and women who are in our schools, and some are valedictorians, and they're going to college, and they're contributing not only to a much more diverse society, but also in their way to our economy. Okay. Any other thoughts?
Along those same lines, what is the message for today? Civility discourse, which you're still going to promote with Robert Ray, Senator Drake.
So thanks for the question, Cynthia. I think it's the epitome of what David just described and what I was sharing earlier. The Robert D. and Billy Ray Center is not just to honor them by name, it's through their life's work. And the refugee relocation is a tremendous example of ethical leadership, doing the right thing, even though it was not the political popular thing within the state. And took a lot of heavy lifting of these gentlemen and others and Iowans and local communities across the state that welcomed these individuals in, and it was not popular in many corners of the state. But Governor Ray led for what was the greater good in the long term of what he believed would happen, and in fact, that has played out to be the case. Iowa is enriched by this. We're all very proud of this right now in our state and look back and reflect on this era, and it is a lesson that ethical leadership and character in leadership then as an outcome is civility, and we need to be much more intentional about that. And how do we have those difficult discussions? And it doesn't mean that we all have to agree. Governor Ray was huge on manners, but civility is so much more than manners and niceties. It's the ability to have dialogue over very difficult issues, of which we can then try to come together as a community. An example of the work of the Ray Center at Drake University is, in fact, we're launching today a series of 8 community conversations. The first is in the Cedar Valley and Waterloo on equipping communities with tools and strategies to have civil dialogue. We're doing this in partnership with the National Institute on Civil Discourse. There will be one here in Des Moines, and there's 6 others across the state. That's the legacy, I believe, of the civility and the leadership that these issues surface through Governor Ray and his leadership, and our lessons for us as Iowans today to emulate.
Well said. We can wrap it up here anytime you'd like, but if there's another question, we're obviously here. If not, we'll talk to you one-on-one. Thank you.